Hi friends, Joe Edelmann here again. So recently I've fallen down a rabbit hole around Jonny Greenwood's classic distortion tone. Eagle-eyed fans of the band and of the all-knowing king of gear will probably already know that Jonny Greenwood's signature rig involves a lace sensor pickup-equipped Telecaster Plus model from the 90s, a Marshall Shredmaster distortion pedal, and a solid-state Fender 85 amplifier. At the time that I made my cover of the song Sulk, I experimented with trying to get some hot humbucker mojo by putting a single coil-sized Seymour Duncan hot rails into the bridge of my own Telecaster, along with an upgraded Jonny Greenwood style control plate from 920D Custom. And it actually provided a very similar tone, one which was most certainly distinct from the classic single coil sound. But I ultimately decided to return the hot rails. The problem for me was that I intended to also use the hot rails in a coil split mode for a more typical Telecaster sound using the push-pull volume pot of my new control plate. And in this mode, whether by design or some error in my particular product, there was a bit too much undesirable microphonic activity, so I could hear a high-pitched ringing after strumming too hard, and even moving the guitar strap or tapping on the body was amplified through the guitar pickup. It might have just been a fluke, but it was enough for me to decide to try something else. I ultimately decided to go all the way to a Tele Plus inspired setup. I got both lace pickups, a new humbucker sized bridge, and a pickguard with a slot for the larger Stratocaster sized lace blue neck pickup. And I had my local shop do the wood routing. And here it is. I've put links for where I obtained all the parts involved in the description. These are not affiliate links or anything. I was not paid to say any of this, nor am I sponsored by Lace, Seymour Duncan, or anyone else for that matter. But hey, if any of you companies are watching and you want to sponsor me, call me. For the rest of you, if you like these videos, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and tap the bell for notifications. Hey friends, future Joe Edelmann here with some extra details on the compatibility of this mod. The precise specifications in terms of body routing and bridge placement and mounting style will vary from model to model of Fender Telecaster. Importantly, the classic Telecaster spec has a smaller body route for the neck pickup than the size of a lace sensor, which is Strat pickup sized. Mine was an American Deluxe Ash Telecaster from 2004, which I was lucky to discover was already secretly pre-routed to accept anything as big as a full-sized humbucker in the neck position. Still, you'll most likely need a new pickguard with a Strat-sized pickup cut out. The original Tele Plus has a separated chrome pickup ring and a hardtail bridge with a gap in between. And this is where rerouting a non-humbucker standard Tele can get you in trouble, since if you use those Telecaster Plus parts, there's a good chance that the angled slant of the old single coil hole will poke into this gap. The easy solution is to get a one-piece bridge and pickup plate that is humbucker sized and will cover this gap, like I did. Here the pickguard will also need to have a wider opening, since this new bridge is wider than the standard Tele bridge plate. Mine is made by Goto, and I purchased it along with a resized pickguard from Warmouth. The additional catch is that, like I said, different models, from American Modern to the more classic or some of the Mexican Fenders, will have either 3 or 4 mounting holes for the bridge, either below or above the holes where the strings come through the body. Mine originally had 3 mounting holes below the string holes, and the Goto, like a vintage Fender, has 4 screws above the strings, so you may need to drill some new holes there. But luckily, the big solid plate will once again cover up the traces of this mod. Back to the video. Now, I know that to some of you, this is a bridge too far into gearism, and that even Jonny would say that guitars are for the most part homogeneous tools. He's not entirely wrong. It's our responsibility as guitarists to bring our own attitude to whatever we pick up, and Jonny Greenwood will always sound like Jonny Greenwood, even on a BC Rich. But apart from my obvious desire to send up one of my greatest influences, I was actually really intrigued by what I saw as the unique versatility of this forgotten Fender setup from a bygone era. And I was pleasantly surprised with what I found. To set the stage a little bit more, let's briefly talk about the differences between single coils and humbuckers for those that are less familiar. Single coil pickups, which are the bedrock of a classic Fender guitar sound, are exactly that, a single coil of copper wire around a magnet or several magnetic pole pieces which pick up vibration from the strings and induce an electrical current. Humbuckers are essentially 2 single coils put side by side with opposite magnetic field directions that, as the name suggests, buck or reduce the hum that can come from various forms of electrical interference. As a result of their unique construction, they generally have a thicker, louder, and darker sound than single coils, which are typically described as bright or glassy, and they have a lot of high-end bite, especially with gain. The lace sensor pickups offer an interesting and unique variation on these basic designs. The neck pickup, the lace sensor blue, is a true single coil of wire, but there are additional magnets and a metal comb that are placed inside the pickup assembly that reshape the magnetic pickup pattern and effectively reduce hum and interference a different way without it being a true humbucker. That being said, it's actually voiced in its EQ profile to sound something more like a humbucker would, with a deeper, more powerful low-end register. The dually red is actually two single-coil lace sensor red pickups that are placed side by side, which can be wired in series like a traditional humbucker would be. They can also be split and selected individually, as was my original intention, with the benefit of the split coil being a full-size single coil, as opposed to the slightly smaller sub-coils of a conventional humbucker, or especially of a mini humbucker like the rails. Each red is voiced as a very hot, high-output pickup, which together gives it a sharp mid-range frequency peak around 1.5 kilohertz, and a strong low-end presence that leads to a rich and full sound with distortion. At this point, I want to offer thanks to a couple friends and fellow Jonny tone enthusiasts who provided sound samples of their lace pickups and helped me compare to the rails during its brief tenure in my guitar. The obvious first one is the king of gear himself, and he of course has several good articles about single coils and humbuckers in your telly and the benefits and drawbacks to each type. I've linked one particularly helpful one in the description. Next, of course, my collaboration partner Taka, and finally another Radiohead-loving, gear-demoing Canadian YouTuber by the name of Landon Bailey. All three were incredibly helpful in giving me additional info to make my decision. Unfortunately, given my lack of foresight, I don't have perfectly analogous samples of all three bridge pickups. The original Fender single coil, which was actually one of their noiseless series, the hot rails, and the lace, to demonstrate what I mean. But I do at least have some clips of me using each at different points over time to maybe shed some light on the differences. Again, it's not a terribly controlled experiment, but the point is that while I think you can get a good Jonny vibe out of all three, there's a reason why his setup is distinctive. Before I do that, let's come back to the other two ingredients in the sound, the choice of pedal and the choice of amp. I continue to use my King of Gear Oxford drive, which is a clone of the Marshall Shredmaster amongst other amazing things, as my primary distortion. The Shredmaster has a very distinct sound versus other high-gain pedals that I've used in the past. It has a very smooth quality and a very tweakable 3-band EQ. The closest analog that I've experienced is the MXR Super Badass Distortion, which is also another example of a 3-band EQ distortion that can get very high gain. This pedal I used prior to acquiring the Oxford when making Burn Holiday's OK Computer tribute. For the amp, this is where your mileage may truly vary. Every amp reacts a little bit differently to the same pedal, gain pedals especially. Categorically speaking, however, the most popular class of amps, tube amps, will interact strongly with gain pedals since they will contribute some additional overdrive, compression, and what is known as tube sag as a result of being pushed harder by the increased signal strength of a high gain pedal. Solid state amps, on the other hand, like Jonny's 85, have substantially higher headroom than tube amps, which is the volume or signal level that can be reached without clipping or transforming the incoming signal at all and keeping it clean. So they essentially provide a very neutral platform or tone vacuum that will leave most of the contribution to the pedal and the guitar, leading to a very direct sound that's somewhat akin to plugging straight into a recording interface. Both types of behavior can be useful and desirable at different times. For instance, the tube amp's clean sound without pedals is usually a bit more exciting and lively than a solid state, especially on amps like Jonny's complimentary Vox AC30. So what did I do? Well, you probably guessed, me being the obsessive that I am, I found a used 85 on Reverb for a decent price, and I tried the full Jonny 3-course menu for myself. Of course, I'm completely biased, and I can hear Jonny's guitar sound in my sleep, but I've got to say, this is it. A combination of mid-heavy pickup, Marshall voice distortion, and neutral amp canvas gives that screaming, biting, yet altogether smooth and classic sound that Jonny is famous for. But I'm a fool. There's an additional element that I haven't mentioned, and that is the unique choice of tone control from the Tele Plus, which is the TBX, or treble bass expander. It's actually two potentiometers stacked into one, with a center detent at halfway up. When you turn it down below this point, a normal 250K potentiometer rolls off treble like it normally would in a tone control, and when you turn it up past that point, a 1 meg potentiometer instead rolls off bass, giving a thinner sound. I love this feature since both the Lace Blue and Red, and most humbuckers for that matter, have such ample low end that it can make certain sounds a bit muddy without a little bit of bass roll off. It's the flip side of the coin with traditional Strats, Teles, and Jazzmasters that have so much high end on the bridge single coil that you often need to roll the tone down a tiny bit to get the best sound out of them. Here I have both options, plus the coil split at the bridge, so there's just a really wide gamut of sounds that I can cover, from very deep and jazzy, to bright and funky, to balanced and heavy in just one guitar. I've been focused for most of this video in describing Jonny's distorted tone, and so therefore mostly on the bridge pickup, the dually red. But I just want to say how pleasantly surprised I was by the Lace Blue. I was a bit nervous making that switch as well, because I actually tend to really like single coil neck pickups, especially on, say, a Fender Strat, for their bell-like tone and their clarity. I actually tend to dislike most Gibson neck pickup sounds for being too muddy or woofy, especially in medium or high gain scenarios. This pickup is kind of like the best of both worlds. It has more body and oomph than a Teles neck pickup, which is actually a little bit boxy and mid-rangey, and yet it's still very clear and present like a single coil would be also. The dually red has a very interesting and unique persona. Clean, in humbucker mode, it's pretty dark and deep, almost like the neck pickup. You can obviously fine-tune that with the TBX, but its high output means that for almost all amp settings you're still going to get some breakup if you strum hard enough. But that's actually pretty cool, and you can back up the volume knob to just reduce this a little bit. When split, and in my case the split is selecting the back coil here towards the bridge, but you can also wire it to select this coil instead. And in the original Tele Plus there was actually a three-way switch to let you pick either. You know, when you do this coil split, it's a lot brighter and more Telecaster-esque and twangy, and I like that, you know, so I have the versatility of both types of bridge pickup. But that low and low-mid frequency thing, you know, that it does, despite also being a big part of Jonny's clean sound on live performances of Weird Fishes, Let Down, Full Stop, etc., it's really how the smoothness and the fullness of the Shredmaster comes out. With a single coil and a high-gain distortion, things tend to get a bit spiky in the treble and thin at the bottom. So what would I recommend to all of you? If you own a Telecaster, if you love its natural brightness and twang, and you have no interest in higher output humbucker style sounds, then this pickup set's probably not for you. It's definitely its own animal. You know, that being said, I think it actually offers a lot of versatility, especially with the TBX control. And, you know, it's a sizable mod for the garden variety Telecaster that's not humbucker ready. Like the King of Gear points out, the cost of the pickups, the new bridge, pick guard, control plate, and routing add up to be pretty substantial. Interestingly though, the amount of wood that they need to cut is actually quite small, so I wouldn't worry too much about its impact on the tone or sustain of the guitar. If you're not that concerned about coil split sounds like I was, and you want a cheaper and less invasive option, I will say the sound of the hot rails in its humbucker mode comes very close to the Lace Dooley Red. It's not exact, and you can further tweak the pickup's EQ profile using extra capacitors and different pot values for the volume, things like that, but it's got the same mojo and it takes distortion like a champ. I hope this has been informative to folks that are interested in Jonny's tone and in these pickups. I'm just loving this guitar right now, and I can't wait to make more covers with it and do my own thing with it. It really, really rocks. So that's all for now, and I hope to see you guys again soon.